Hello, my name's Tom Sharples and I'm one of the tutors for this course. Today I'd like to take you through the Battle of Thermopylae and highlight some of the key details of this battle. So what I'll be doing is, essentially I'll be providing some commentary over the top of a simulation of the battle, or the last day of the battle, the last stand, that's been created in the Ultimate Battle Simulator, a PC program that allows you to render thousands of units and see how the battle plays out. So in this case, they've got 20,000 Persians up against 300 Spartans. And as I provide the commentary, you'll see that some of the details are not really correct, but it gives you a good idea of possibly what the battle may have looked like. So this simulation, as you can see, there's the Persians facing up against, or as they run towards the 300 Spartans. So this, as I said, this is really the last day of the 3-day battle, because it actually lasted, the entire Battle of Thermopylae lasted 3 days in total, with this famous last stand of Leonidas and his 300 Spartiates being the last day only. The 300 was a traditional cohort selected to protect the kings of Sparta while they were at war. But they were not the only Greeks at Thermopylae. Greek forces were initially comprised of 500 soldiers at Tegea, 500 from Mantinea, 120 from Orchomenus, 1,000 from the rest of Arcadia, and then there was 400 from Corinth, 200 from Phaeus, and 80 from Mycenae, and 700 from Thespe, and 400 from Thebes. And the Locrians and the Phoenicians also sent several thousands of soldiers. So you can see the classic imagery of the battle is very selective when highlighting Leonidas and the 300, though Leonidas was the supreme commander of this force, and Herodotus mentions the reluctance of the other Greek nations to fight. So there is really reason to highlight the Spartans in this instance. The fear of the Greek nations was largely due to Xerxes' forces. And as you can see, as the camera pans around, this is only 20,000. You can imagine what it would be like seeing something running towards you of that magnitude. And his forces, Xerxes' forces, which had marched from Persia and were joined by various allies on the way, had, according to Herodotus, a total number in excess of 1 million fighting men. When scouts reported the Greek numbers to Xerxes, he actually laughed at their comparatively pitiful nature. So Herodotus also gives us a description of the pass of Thermopylae. So the locals knew the pass at Thermopylae by another name, Pylae, or the gates, likely as its narrowness funneled travelers, much like the gates of a city before they entered the Greek mainland from Trachis to the north. So it sort of acts as very much like a natural gate. And according to Herodotus in Book 7, Chapter 176, both before and after Thermopylae, the path narrows to no more than a cart track. The western part of Thermopylae is a sheer, tall, inaccessible cliff, while to the east of the road, there's only marshland and the sea. And you'll see in this simulation, to the east, so if the Persians are moving south and the Spartans are facing north, you'll see as it zooms out, there's the sea down below, and there's the slopes of the mountains. So very much a narrow pass there. And so you can see why the Greek forces wanted to use this position to delay the Persian advance, as large numbers are actually an encumbrance in this instance. So I'll give you the first 2 days of the battle. So in the first 2 days, and remembering that there's a lot of other Greek nations there, Xerxes actually waited for 4 days for the Greeks to run away, because he thought once they see the size of the force that they'll be up against, they'd basically just turn tail. But Xerxes basically waited 4 days and was really disappointed. But on the 5th day, he ordered a force of Medes to attack the Greek position, during which the Medes were slaughtered. In a case of Greek propaganda, Herodotus says that Xerxes realized that he had plenty of troops, but not many men. Xerxes then sent his personally selected Persian soldiers, the Immortals, but they actually fared no better. In fact, the Spartans would feign retreat, allow the Persian battle cry to go up, and then turn and begin to massacre them. And on the second day of battle, Xerxes' forces fared no better, with the Persian king becoming exasperated. But a Malian by the name of Ephialtes actually offered to lead the Persians down a mountain path to Thermopylae, so actually encircling behind the Greek forces, which would circumvent the attacking force that was facing them and lead to their ruin from behind. And so that's actually what happened on the second day. So as you can see, this is the first day, and look at what's already happening. I mean, the bodies are absolutely piling up because this is a practicality of what they were doing. I mean, this is only 20,000. And as you can see, the Persians are starting to encircle them, but the Spartans are sort of turning to face them. But look at the sea of bodies. I mean, that's literally what it would have been like as the battle was happening. So it's at this point that Herodotus, so after the first 2 days, so again, this is, don't forget, this is the final day of the battle. So there's been 2 days of battle prior to this. And it's at this point that Herodotus begins to hint the battle may be an example of heroic fate and sacrifice. He says during book 7, chapter 219, that the first sign of the Greeks had a betrayal was that a diviner read in a sacrificial animal that death would come to them at the dawn of what was the third day of fighting. So this is the third day. But then some deserters turned up not long afterwards and tell them the Persians are taking the mountain path. And after that, scouts spot the enemy force. So this diviner, he probably only gave them the heads up maybe a couple of hours before it was actually pointed out what was going to happen. So with news of this betrayal and the inevitable movement of the Persians as they're coming down the mountain, which is actually not recreated in this, we've only really got the Spartans facing up. So essentially what they're doing is they're moving out to fight the Persian invaders because they know it's inevitable that they're going to die. So on the third day, with news of the betrayal confirmed, Leonidas sent the Greek forces away in order to save them, but he himself stayed as Spartans were not able to desert their post. And here another hint of fate is given by Herodotus, with the oracle of Delphi supposedly stating at the start of the war in a hexameter verse. She said the following. She said, "Here is your fate, inhabitants of spacious Sparta. Either your great and glorious city will be destroyed by men descended from Perseus, the Persians, or that will not be. But the borders of Lacedaemonian, where the Spartans rule, will mourn the death of a king descended from Heracles, which is Leonidas. For neither the might of bulls nor yet that of lions will check the foe head on, since he has the might of Zeus." Thus, heroic fate is finally sealed for Leonidas by the Pythia at Delphi, and Herodotus believes this is the knowledge of his fate that's kept the Spartan king at Thermopylae. The Thespians, who we mentioned earlier in the other Greek forces, actually bravely decided to stay, but they never get a mention, and they're not even in this simulation. So there's plenty of Thespians here who have said, yes, I want to stay and fight. But we only ever see these 300 Spartans and Leonidas. So it's a bit sad the Thespians are always forgotten. And there was also Thebans present, but Herodotus says in chapter 222 of book 7, that they were Leonidas's hostages because he actually feared they'd betray them, all the Greeks, and were otherwise reluctant to fight. So the only reason they're there is Leonidas has got them in hostage as a hostage. But as you can see here, there's only 300 Spartans. There's no Thespians and there's no one from Thebes, but that's generally how these recreations go. But as you can see, again, this absolute sea of Persians. I can't imagine what it must have been like standing there and realizing, wow, as you fight, basically you've got an ocean of Persians still to come. So on the morning of the third day, and as you can see, oh my God, the bodies are piling up yet again. But on the morning of the third day, Xerxes performed libations probably because he's a Zoroastrian, it would have been to Ahura Mazda. And in the middle of the morning, the Persians attacked, which allowed the force that took the mountain road to move quickly down into position. The account of the battle is brief and lacking in detail, as is the case with most of Herodotus's history, as he clearly was not a soldier or had any interest or knowledge of war, which allows subsequent depictions, such as this one, to invent their own versions. Leonidas and his forces move forward from the pass to a broader field and meet the Persians head on, as they know their attack is going to come from the rear. and their death is inevitable. So that's actually why, even though they were on a more fortified position, they come out to fight the Persians because they know they're going to die. Herodotus actually says in chapter 223 that the Persian casualties are extremely high, as their regimental commanders had whips and were forcing the soldiers forward onto the Greek spears, much as like happening in the simulation. You can see the bodies are falling into the ocean as they move forward. So it's not depicted here, but there's actually, regimental commanders whipping them forward onto the Greek spears. So in fact, many Persians died by being trampled by their commanders as they move, by the comrades as they move forward, because they weren't allowed to move backwards. So it was actually a stampede. Herodotus describes the Persian deaths as beyond counting. And as you can start to see with these bodies piling up, that's very much what's happening in this simulation. Eventually, the Greek spears broke and swords were used. And then Leonidas and his soldiers eventually fall, but so too in this battle are 2 of Darius' sons and 2 of Xerxes' brothers. And when the Persians arrive from the mountain pass, which is not depicted in this simulation, the remaining Greeks retreated to a narrow spur and fight with knives because they've got nothing else left. And then eventually succumb to a hail of Persian arrows that are so numerous, they actually block out the sun. So again, that's also missing from this simulation, that there was a barrage of arrows happening as well. Herodotus actually spends far more time outlining the individual bravery of soldiers during this battle, and also cowardice, with one Spartan surviving the battle but subsequently hanging himself from shame after returning home. The fact that Herodotus spends over 30 chapters on what was a minor 3-day skirmish shows how much he finds the theme of heroic sacrifice important, and the fact that the history has been retold so many times, as even included in 2021 in a battle simulation, is a testament to the historian's ability to paint a magnificent literary picture. And as you can see, there's still some Spartans standing, but as the simulation goes on, they die more and more and more. And that's actually why the simulation has to restart, because as you saw before, they get encircled and die. But as you can see, look at the mountain of bodies piling up, and still so many thousands of Persians come. So what a wonderful battle simulation. As the camera sweeps down, you can see what's going on here. And as you can see as well, all the spears have gone, and now we're down to just swords. But again, there's no Thebes or Thespians here or any other Greek forces. So a very, very interesting battle simulation. But as I've outlined, there's a number of key details missing from this one. So with that, thank you very much. And that's my outline of the Battle of Thermopylae.